The day had worn itself thin by the time Clara Bellamy saw them through the wavering curtain of heat. A man and a boy, riding a mule whose ears drooped like wilted leaves, moved slow along the dirt road, the kind of slow that came not from leisure but from miles and hunger. She was on the porch with her needle poised mid-stitch, the smell of sun-baked earth and wood smoke lingering in the still air. The land had been quiet for so long, she had almost believed it would stay that way. But the road, like the wind, had its own mind. The man halted at her gate, tipping his hat as if not to stir the dust further. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and deliberate, "could we trouble you for water? Just till the mule can stand proper again." The boy, thin as a fence rail, clutched a small bundle in his lap, eyes wide under the shadow of a brim too large for him. Clara took in the scene, dust caked on boots, the faint slump of the man's shoulders, and felt the weight of decision. The town's tongues were quick to turn kindness into scandal. Still, the boy's gaze held something she could not quite name. "Water," she said at last, nodding toward the pump, "but the barn's all I've got." The boy slid down, holding something in his small hands. It was a whittled horse, rough-hewn but careful in its form. He offered it to her, without words, a silent bridge across the space between strangers. She took it, the cedar warm from his palm, and felt the shape of him there. Inside the barn, the man moved with quiet efficiency, stripping the saddle, checking the mule's legs, his hands steady. By nightfall, the air turned cool, and a purple dusk settled over the yard. When she stepped outside to gather the wash, she saw him at her barn door, mending the broken hinge she had meant to fix for weeks. He did not mention it. He simply worked until the hinge swung smooth again. The next morning, Martha Kettle arrived, the mercantile's bell likely still ringing from her departure. She carried a bag of flour and the sharp scent of curiosity. Her eyes flicked toward the barn before she even reached the porch. "Strangers under your roof?" she said, letting the question drip like honey over thorns. "You know how Boone will twist that by supper time." Clara met her gaze. The boy's just a boy, and the man's just passing through. Passing through is one thing. Lingering is another. Martha's mouth pinched, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a sliver of respect for the woman who never bowed to Boone. Still, the warning hung between them like damp laundry. When Martha left, Clara lingered in the yard, watching Elias. She had heard the boy call him that, splitting wood without being asked. His movements were steady, unhurried, as though the work itself was a kind of speech. Luke played nearby, chasing a grasshopper, the sound of his laughter carrying a note that made Clara stop. It was not the laughter of a boy used to plenty. It was the laughter of someone startled by joy. By midday, the air was thick with the scent of sage and sun-warmed dust. That was when words reached her. Boone had been at the poker table in the saloon, telling anyone who'd listened that Clara Bellamy was making up for lost chances. The phrase slid under her skin like a splinter. She could see him as he'd been the day she turned him down, eyes hard, his hand tightening on the brim of his hat as though to keep from striking her. "You'll regret this, Clara," he'd said, voice low enough for only her to hear. That promise had walked beside her ever since. She kept to herself the rest of the afternoon, working at the sewing table, her needle stabbing through cloth with unnecessary force. When she stepped onto the porch at dusk, she found a bundle of wildflowers on the railing. No note, just the stems tied with a thin strip of leather. She glanced toward the barn. Elias was inside, the lamplight making a silhouette of him against the boards. The clouds gathered thick and heavy that night. A sudden rain came on, sharp against the roof, finding the barn's cracks and dripping onto the hay. She took the lantern, opened the barn door, and saw the boy curled under a thin blanket while Elias shifted a bucket to catch the water. "You'll both come inside," she said, not a question. Elias looked up. For a moment, he seemed about to refuse, but something in her face must have said she would not be moved. He nodded, waking Luke gently. Inside, she spread an old quilt by the stove, its colors faded to the softness of old memories. The boy was asleep before the storm had fully settled over the roof. Elias stood near the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Thank you," he said, as though the words cost him. "Storms pass quicker when folks aren't alone," she replied, turning back to the kettle. Outside, the rain softened to a steady patter, but the quiet between them was different now, Not the wary silence of strangers, but something just beginning to know its shape. She did not yet know the man was more than the road claimed, nor that letting him stay would draw the eyes of men who preferred she be left with nothing at all. The road into town was rutted from spring rains, the mule's hooves sinking with each step. Clara walked beside Elias and Luke, her basket light, but her back straight. The town felt different when entered in company. Still, the moment they reached the boardwalk, whispers curled through the air like smoke. Women's eyes slid past her, men's hats tipped without warmth. Somewhere, a screen door slammed hard enough to make Luke flinch. Sheriff Otis Harrow stepped from the shade of his office, badge dull in the overcast light. His eyes traveled from Clara to Elias and back again. "This your company these days, Clara?" His smile was too thin to be kind. Elias's voice was even. "We're buying flour. That's all." Harrow's gaze lingered. "Strangers don't last long here, especially not ones who make the wrong friends." The words were aimed at both of them, but his glance at Clara carried the real weight. Inside the mercantile, Martha Kettle busied herself with the shelves, pretending not to see them. When Clara asked for flour, the price was higher than the week before. "Boone's new tax," Martha murmured, almost apologetic. "Says it's for the good of the town." Her eyes darted to Elias, then away. "Some folks are falling behind already. Boone's buying up their land cheap. They left with less than they came for." Outside, Luke wandered to the livery while Elias tied the flour to the mule. When they caught up to him, he was listening to a stable boy, both crouched by a stray dog. The boy's words carried in the still air. "My pa says Boone's going to take our place come winter if we can't pay. Sheriff's in on it. Everyone knows." That night, Clara found Elias by the lamplight, bent over a small leather journal, his pencil moving in precise lines. He shut it when he saw her. She said nothing, only set a cup of coffee by his hand and left the lantern burning in the window, for when he came back from wherever, he went after dark. In the morning, she found fresh wood stacked by the door, split clean and neat. Days passed like this, small exchanges that built something unnamed. Yet the air grew heavier. Riders passed the homestead more often, slowing near her gate. Word spread that Boone had been in the saloon, saying a horse thief was hiding out at Clara Bellamy's. It was near sunset when Boone himself arrived, dust on his boots, Sheriff Harrow at his side. 3 other men fanned out across her yard. "Evening, Clara," Boone said, his voice syrup over steel. "I hear you've taken in a man with a record. Thought I'd save you the trouble of hosting him." Elias stepped from the barn, calm as stone. Boone's eyes narrowed. "You've got a choice, Crow. Leave now or watch this widow lose her land over unpaid fines." Clara's voice was sharp. "There are no fines." Boone's smile widened. "Paperwork says otherwise. Sheriff will see it's done." Elias's jaw tightened, but he only said, "We'll be gone by morning." He met Clara's eyes briefly before turning back to the barn. Boone lingered a moment, as if savoring the sight of her holding her ground, then left with his men. That night, when Clara went to fetch kindling, her hand brushed something in the woodpile, a folded paper sealed with red wax. The imprint was unmistakable, the governor's seal. Her pulse stumbled. Inside, Elias was tending the fire. She set the paper on the table. His gaze flicked to it, then to her. "I didn't plan for you to see that." "Then tell me why you're here," she said, the air between them taut. "I'm Elias Crow," he said quietly, "governor of this state. I came in plain clothes to see what Boone's done to this town. The taxes, the land seizures, it's worse than the letters said." He looked toward the sleeping Luke. "If Boone knew who I was, he'd strike at the boy first." Her hands curled against her skirts. "If you stay, you'll bring his wrath on this house. If I leave, Boone keeps everything he's stolen." Sleep never came for her that night. She heard the wind shift, the creak of the barn boards, the steady breathing of the boy in her quilt. By dawn, hoofbeats approached. Boone's men again, with the sheriff, their shapes black against the pale light. They rode and ready to take what they wanted. But they weren't the first there. Half the town stood in her yard, Martha Kettle in the front, her chin high. Word had spread overnight. Elias had spoken quietly to enough people for the truth to root. Murmurs rose as Boone dismounted. "This is my land," Clara said, stepping forward before Boone could speak. Her voice carried steady. And I'll tell you what else is mine. The memory of the day you threatened me when I refused your hand. Folks should know the kind of man who calls himself their better. The crowd shifted. Some took a step closer to her. Others turned toward Boone with faces gone hard. Harrow's eyes darted, weighing which way the wind now blew. Arrest him, Boone ordered. Harrow didn't move. No crime here I can see. Boone's face darkened. He looked from Harrow to the townsfolk, then to Elias, and saw something he couldn't unsee. The tide had gone out from under him. Without another word, he swung into the saddle and rode hard toward the horizon, the dust swallowing him. Silence held for a long breath before people began to leave, nodding at Clara as they passed. Martha lingered only long enough to say, "You've got more friends than you thought." When the yard was empty, Elias looked at her, his hat in his hands. "I'll have to go back to the capital. There's work to do before this is finished." Luke ran to her, hugging her waist. "You made it feel like home," he whispered. Clara watched them ride away as the lights spilled gold over the land. The wind lifted her hair, carrying with it the last of the storm that had hung over her for years. But in her chest, something new had taken root, quiet, steady, and not easily shaken. She didn't yet know if the road would bring him back. But she knew this. Some storms take years to gather and only minutes to break, leaving the sky so clear it feels like a promise.